Okay, this is the third and final part of the Understanding Stress presentation. We've looked so far at the human story of where we come from as a species, how we began our life of our species as hunter-gatherers, and how that lifestyle and the needs which that lifestyle presented were met by certain brain functions, i.e. the emotional life which we have, including the fight or flight response, and how that worked for us in certain scenarios, but when it becomes chronic in the modern age with modern predators and modern problems, it becomes less than helpful. We looked at the development of the faculty of imagination, which as well as being a wonderful survival tool helping us to solve our problems, also enabled us to worry, to take the predators home with us in our heads, and to keep that fight or flight response, a system which was designed for short times of intense activity rather to keep it chronically engaged in the system in an unhelpful manner. We looked at the idea of spare capacity and also how important it is to go and get our needs met in balance in the environment. So now we're going to look at the symptoms of stress. And when we think of where we've been so far and the human story where we've come from, the symptoms of stress become quite obvious and easy to work out. Because stress occurs because something happens in our lives that we feel we're unable to cope with, i.e. a modern style of predator approaches. Now, as I've said, in the good old days, you dealt with your predator, this fight or flight response came online, and a very short time later you would have been, after having engaged in some intense physical activity, it would be the end of the story one way or another, and the fight or flight response would be switched off and you're okay to carry on the rest of your life. But now, since imagination developed about 40 to 45,000 years ago, we take the predator home in our head, whatever problem we have, whatever we think we can't cope with, and we turn it over in our minds, we worry about it, and the bit of our mind, that security centre, the amygdala, doesn't know the difference between a predator in the real world and a predator in the imagination. It's a one-trick pony, so it sets off the fight or flight response and keeps you in that condition for days, for weeks, for months, for years. And so we have a system designed to save our lives and to be switched on for a short duration, 10-15 minutes. And now instead we have people whose fight or flight response is firing off to one degree or another chronically over an extended period of time. So the symptoms we feel are the results of our bodies, our minds and our brains being prepared for an intense activity session to do with real and present danger. And so what sort of things are we talking about? Well, we're talking about heart rate being turned up. We're talking about hormones like adrenaline being released into the body to prepare the system for quick action. We're talking about muscle tensioning so that your muscles are not going from completely slack to intense activity. So a readiness potential creeps into your muscles so you can suddenly spring into action. So that slight tension in the system. We're talking about the fact that your brain is guessing you may be injured in an event, and so it prepares hormones like cortisol, which are there to deal with inflammation and injury. Now these things are great for a short time, not so good in the long term. Also, your blood supply, the circulation, is being diverted towards the big muscle groups to enable you to spring into action. But that means it's also being diverted away from slow processes, which can easily wait for a little bit later, like digestion. So when you think of this, it explains an awful lot of the symptoms of stress. The dodgy tummies, sometimes diarrhea, people off their food, feeling a bit nauseous. The muscle tension, which can lead to headaches, to aching backs, to aching necks, to tight shoulders. The suppressed immune system, which is the long-term effect of the adrenaline and the cortisol and all this sort of stuff, and as a whole cocktail, look it up if you like, it's a fascinating story. But all these chemicals, which are great for a short time, ultimately they suppress your immune system, make you less able to resist cold viruses, infections, etc. Lipids, which are fats, are being released into your bloodstream to give you an energy supply. Now, they're at a higher than normal level when you're in fight or flight. And therefore, again, that's fine if you're going to run it off and use up that energy, but over a period of time you've got more fat floating around in your arteries, and long-term chronic stress is correlative with greater incidences of cardiovascular disease and with certain forms of cancer and all sorts of things you just don't want. So being chronically stressed is a great predictor of future ill health, a greater predictor than smoking or consuming alcohol, for instance. So it's really, really bad for us to be chronically in this condition, so we must find some way of turning that off, and we'll come to this shortly. So in our bodies, headachy, dodgy tummies, whatever. Mind, remember, the more emotional you are, the stupider you are, the more switched on your emotional brain, the more switched off your frontal lobes. So to the degree to which you are emotional, i.e. anxious, fearful, angry, irritable, the less access you've got to your frontal lobes. Therefore, you're thrown back on the thinking style of the emotional brain, the black and white thinking, so you're not going to have your full intelligence available to you to be able to deal with everyday problems, to be able to deal with work, relationships, etc. Also, you're not going to be able to concentrate so well, because if there's a predator on the prowl, your mind keeps coming back to it. So you're never going to get lost in a good book or in a spreadsheet, because your mind will be distracted and come back to the problem continuously. Behaviour. People will be more irritable. Remember, the spare capacity has shrunk, being into because of the emotional arousal, and so you're hitting that tipping point quicker. So we would expect people to become more fractious, more irritable, more anxious. As energy gets eaten up and the spare capacity gets eaten into, we might expect personal hygiene even to suffer. People being late for work, people not taking care of themselves in the way that they should. These all things happen in the longer term. People might withdraw. So when you think all emotions are in the language of fight or flight, go towards, move away, or freeze. So typically we see people anger outbursts, people withdrawing away, or people sitting at their desks becoming completely unproductive. That's freeze. So we see versions of those sorts of things going on. So thinking of where this comes from, and that you're chronically in fight or flight, you quickly get to understand the symptoms of stress. Another thing which sometimes happens, we'll come to that in a moment, panic attacks can occur. Now this is really the thick end of the wedge. This is when stress has built up and then you get the extra bit, that the straw that breaks the camel's back, and then people are really into fight or flight, and it may occur just for that extra stress that comes on, I can't cope anymore. It may be that some stimulus sets off something associated with a phobic reaction or with a trauma, and then people find themselves fully in fight or flight. But of course originally fight or flight was meant to get you running, to get you fighting, to get you climbing a tree. But now you're standing in a supermarket, you're sat in your living room, and all these processes are occurring and you're not engaged in physical activity. So the panic attack is that fight or flight trying to prepare you for violent action. So it wants to flood your bloodstream with oxygen. It wants to prepare your muscles to move, but instead you stay immobile. As a result of this, you overbreathe, and this is the hyperventilation that occurs, and the heart rate goes up, your face flushes. And what tends to happen in a panic attack, and the one symptom which is very well known, is a hyperventilation, but the upshot of it is people feel as if they're not getting enough air in. They feel as if they're suffocating, or they feel as if they're going to have a heart attack, and of course that frightens them even more, and the whole thing becomes self-sustaining. Now what is happening here is, because people are breathing too quickly, they are breathing out too much carbon dioxide. Now you need a certain amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream so that the oxygen you breathe in can stick to the hemoglobin. So without enough carbon dioxide you can't get enough oxygen. But when you breathe too rapidly you breathe out the carbon dioxide, so the oxygen can't stick. Of course, the instinct is to breathe even faster and even more, which makes it worse. So the old solution of breathing into a paper bag worked because you breathed back in the carbon dioxide which you were breathing out, and so it enabled the oxygen to stick, and so you settled down. Or you can breathe into cupped hands. But better by far is to slow the breathing down. Now this is counterintuitive when you feel you're not getting enough air in, but that is the solution, to slow the breathing down. And we have a technique for this, and we'll come to that very shortly. So panic attacks can be the thick end of the wedge of severe stress and chronic stress. Similarly, phobic reactions we've already talked about, and trauma we've already talked about in previous parts of this presentation. But having a panic attack in public, for instance, can be a source of a new trauma. And so again, these things become self-supporting. And what we sometimes find is that people who start off with some stress in their life ultimately start to withdraw from life and stop going out. Because once you've had a panic attack in the supermarket, you don't want to go there again, in case it sets you off again because of the embarrassment, and so the whole of life starts to draw down. This is very easily solved, I have to say, by systematically going back out and sorting out these things, and a good therapist should be able to do this quite readily and quite quickly. So don't worry if you've experienced this, because there are solutions available. So all these things are a sort of sliding scale that can build up. Very unpleasant, but very solvable. Okay, and just remember, it is your brain trying to help you, because the whole fight or flight system, keeping you out of trouble, avoiding predators, it was a system which has served us well over time. But when it's trying to deal with a more sophisticated modern environment, it can become chronic, and then it's not the best tool for the job. So how do we sort stress? This is a page of top tips, if you like, and the first and obvious and easy to say thing is we have to calm down, because stress is a state of high emotional arousal, and in that state you can't think straight, so it means you're in no good way to solve your problems. So until you calm down and get your brain back, you can't really attack your problems. So we have to find relaxation techniques. Now, a quick and very effective way of calming yourself down is a technique we call 7-11 breathing. You may know the 7-11 chain of shops that acted as a mnemonic, so the numbers are not really important. But the way you do the technique is this. It's a breathing technique, and it's designed to send a feedback loop to the emotional part of your brain, the amygdala, telling it to turn off the fight or flight response and to let you relax. And the way you do it is this. You breathe into the tummy, into the abdomen, so it's a low abdominal breath. And you breathe in to a count of 7 and out to a count of 11. So sit quietly, close your eyes, hands on the abdomen, and then as you breathe in, it's as if you're inflating your tummy like inflating a balloon. You can feel it with your hands, you're monitoring the abdomen to make sure you're breathing to the right place. As you breathe out, you breathe out to a count of 11. So the out breath is significantly longer than the in breath, that's the point. But it's a relaxed breath, don't strain, and the numbers I say are not particularly important. So breathe in and out for longer, up to twice as long. So 3 and 6, if that works for you. Count quickly to start with, if you can only do a shallow breath. But as you relax, as your diaphragm relaxes, you get more lung capacity available, you can count nice and slowly and steadily. And 7 and 11 for most people have been found to be good numbers to count to. Do that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that doesn't hurt you. Even 1 or 2 breaths will do. I call them rescue breaths. So if you're not in a situation where you can sit down, close your eyes and spend 5 or 10 minutes, you could be in a crowd of people. You don't want to do this in public because people will feel, well, you're a bit odd, so best not. But take a deep breath, fill your lungs, and as slowly as you can, let the breath out nice and slowly. A few of those and you bring yourself down nice and easily. You can do this standing up, sitting down, lying down, in public, just by doing rescue breaths. This is a great technique for stopping a panic attack. So if you're prone to panic attacks, as soon as you feel it coming on, the first indication, don't let it go, start to do this technique immediately, and it will stop the hyperventilation, it will keep the emotional arousal under control, and it works a treat, believe me. It's really, really effective. If you're in a state of chronic stress or anxiety, I would do this technique 2, 3, 4 times a day, anytime you need it. So if you feel yourself getting a bit irate, stop, a few minutes, carry on. So anytime you need it. But if you practice this as a technique 2 or 3 times a day for 5 or 10 minutes, it'll help you to keep things under control. If you know you're going into a stressful situation, do 5 minutes of this before you go in. Believe me, it works. It's so simple that people can't believe it's as good as it is, and so they don't do it. But if you do it, it will work. And there's very good scientific reasons why it does work, which I won't go into at the moment, but it's briefly be made along. The next thing I'd like to introduce you to is guided imagery. Now, guided imagery is something we do in our imagination. We've looked at worry, which is a misuse of the imagination. So we're already used to the idea that the contents of our imagination affect our mood and affect the degree of emotional arousal in our system. Guided imagery is a way of making our imaginations work for us. And simply, all you have to do is think of a lovely place, relaxing, calm, beautiful place you'd like to go for a walk. This could be somewhere you've been, somewhere in your imagination. It doesn't really matter. Beautiful garden, on the beach, tropical island, whatever does it for you. Doesn't really matter. And in guided imagery, you might like to start perhaps doing a bit of 7-11 breathing to calm yourself down to begin. And then in your imagination, you take yourself off for a walk. Now the thing is, we've all got a dominant sense, a sensory modality that we use. And just to make sure we mop up everybody, use every sense. So as you're strolling along in your imagination, imagine I'm on a beach, say for instance, I close my eyes, I'm going for this lovely walk. What can I see? I can see the sea, the blue of the sea, the sun reflecting off the water. I can see the golden sands, the blue of the sky, some clouds in the sky, the palm trees, the greens and the browns. Go for everything you can see, shapes, colours, textures. Now, what can I hear? I can hear the sea lapping on the shore, breeze in the trees, the birds calling, whatever it is. Then, can I smell anything? Can I smell that sea air? Can I smell the tropical plants and bushes and flowers, breathing in the good air, filling my body with it? Then can I feel anything? The sun on my skin, the fresh air in my face, the sand under my feet. So going through all the senses means that you will definitely get your dominant sense, but you'll also make use of all the ones that are not dominant as well. Now there's no wrong way to do this. Some people have a good visionary thing, they can see the picture, others just feel as if they're floating along in the environment. And it doesn't matter, just whatever works for you, that's okay. So developing this place and being able to go for a lovely relaxing walk fills your imagination with good positive material, and the emotional reaction to that material is to be calm, peaceful and relaxed. So you can tell yourself, soak in the good sun shining on my back, feel the warmth soaking into me, dissolving the tension away. With every step I take, I can go deeper relaxed. Breathing in this good air is making my body energized and calm and relaxed. And just telling yourself this as you're strolling along, nothing complicated, just being there, using the senses, enjoying the place. You can use this at night if you're lying in bed, if you wake up during the night. Don't think, oh no, I'm awake again, I'm not sleeping very well. Think, oh, I have a wonderful opportunity now to go for a beautiful walk in my imagination. And because as we fall asleep, we do a hemispherical switch from left hemisphere dominant process-driven brain functions to right hemispherical image-producing brain functions. That's a normal part of falling asleep. By engaging in guided imagery, we help that hemispherical switch to take place. and it helps us to fall asleep naturally. Not by trying to fall asleep, but just by enjoying floating along, strolling along in a lovely environment. So use guided imagery, develop your own special place, try a few different places, and when you need to, if you find yourself occupied with your worries, rather than say, I mustn't think about this, because that'll make you think about it all the more, just stop and go for a lovely walk in your special place. Give yourself something solid to think of. On a similar vein to this, there will be stuff that you like, stuff that relaxes you, whether it's a particular form of music, whether it's hobbies, well, whatever it is. If you have this stuff prepared, when you find yourself getting stressed about one thing, you can take out the magazine about your hobby and have a flick through. You can put the CD on, or your iPod, or whatever it is, listen to the music, it always cheers you up. So you have stuff that works for you, that takes your attention, fills your mind, and makes you feel good. So by putting that in, you're counteracting the other stuff. But you've got to have that prepared. So I advise people in a workplace, for instance, stick your magazines in your desk drawer. Have some music on your iPod. If you feel yourself struggling or getting irritated, angry, anxious, just stop from 7-Eleven, a few pages of your motorbike magazine, or whatever it happens to be. Calm down, clear your mind, think. Because the next stage is, once you're calm, you use as much of this as you want to or you can in the circumstances, you then have access to your neocortex, again to your frontal lobes. The emotional levels have gone down, your frontal lobes are back online, and now you can think clearly. You can use your full human intelligence to plan, to decide what you're going to do about your problems, how you're going to deal with them. Because remember, it's not the problems that get you stressed, it's your mental reactions to those problems, it's the way you think about them. It's the thinking you can't cope. If you can't cope, you can't cope, and that's it. Can't do anything about it. And some people can't cope, they don't worry about it, they don't get stressed. They don't add stress or depression or anxiety to life's problems. They can either do them or they can't. But it's the people who engage in this anxiety about them that get stressed out. So once you've used calming techniques, and this is a good repertoire for everybody to learn and be able to utilise in daily life, then apply clear thinking. We can apply cognitive techniques, which is basically thinking techniques. So we can challenge the catastrophic thinking of the emotional brain that we discussed in the last presentation. If you're taking things too personally, if you think that your problems are all pervasive, affecting the whole of life, if you think they're permanent, they're never going to get any better, you can now challenge those with sense. Ask yourself, is this really all about me? Is it really affecting all of my life? Is there nothing good left? Is there nothing that I'm enjoying? Is there nothing I can do? Is there no friends left? Think clearly. Does nothing ever change? Well, of course things change. They change all the time. So you can challenge your negative assumptions with clear thinking. And then you can involve yourself in problem solving. What am I going to do? If I've got a list of tasks which are impossible to do today, I can now prioritise them. I can decide which ones I'm just never going to do. If I've got to negotiate with a boss or a manager, how am I going to do that? If there's something about health or home life, putting the kids to school, getting to a hospital appointment, you can plan it, and either you can do it or you can't. And by problem solving, you decide the art of the possible, and then you decide the next step. Because you can only ever be doing one thing at a time, realistically. So what's the next thing? Now, a good technique to use for this is panning. Panning for gold, we call it. And all your problem solving, your goal setting, can come under PAN. PAN stands for positive, achievable, and needs orientated. So is the next step positive? Is it actually doing something realistic and helpful about the issues at hand? Is it achievable? Is it something you can actually go and do now, or within a reasonable time scale? And is it needs orientated? I.e., is it helping you to get your essential emotional needs met? Now, needs are not the same as wants. You've got to have your needs, otherwise you'll be in distress. Wants can go on the back burner, they're just luxuries. So, positive, achievable, needs oriented. Really useful thing to use when you're deciding on what to do next. Many people have heard of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, blah blah blah, time, I never remember what the R stands for, timed and all the rest of it. Look up SMART goals. Some people like that. I prefer PAN, positive, achievable, needs oriented. So these are clear processes. You have to calm yourself down before you can think clearly, before you can problem solve effectively. And when you solve your problems effectively, you'll stop worrying about them. So you short-circuited the system and your fight or flight response will settle down. Perchance, you may need to change an unhelpful pattern match. And so if there's a phobia or a trauma involved, you will need to see a therapist who knows how to change an unhelpful pattern match in the brain. So you need to seek out a human Givens therapist or a similar therapist who knows how to deal with trauma and phobias. Another top tip, take omega-3. Omega-3 oils are essential to our brain function. Our modern diet is largely deficient in omega-3, so unless you're eating lots of oily fish on a regular basis, you should probably be supplementing with omega-3. Now, some companies will sell you a complex of oils, essential oils, or omega-3 6 and 9s. You don't want the 6 and 9s, there's plenty of those in the modern diet, too much of them. But you do want the omega-3s. So it's a great idea, and it's well studied, that omega-3 helps us to inhibit emotions, it helps us to be calm, it helps efficient brain function, and especially if we've been in a stressed state, omega-3 is a very useful supplement to be taken, or at the very least, eat more oily fish. Exercise. Now, we are designed to take exercise. It's as simple as that. We are evolved in this world to move about. Our bodies need movement. But preferably, exercise and movement in an outside location, under blue skies, in green places. And it's been demonstrated again that the colours of a natural environment work on our brains, the sunlight works on our brains, coupled with exercise in parks, in the great outdoors. All of this works to make us feel better and to balance us out. But the fight or flight response, remember, wants us to take exercise. So if you're mega stressed, you can run it off and you will immediately feel better. Now, if the cause of the stress is still there, you will start to feel bad again, but it will give you some temporary relief. But nevertheless, exercise as a regular routine does improve mental functioning, and that's been clearly demonstrated again. So, and it hasn't got to be hard exercise. Even a nice brisk walk in the outdoors is good enough, because it's moderately aerobic, it gets the body moving, it flushes the hormones that have been released by the brain, the stress hormones, flushes them out of the system. If you can walk with a friend, you're fulfilling your social needs as well. So engage in activities that fulfill multiple needs together. Get your exercise needs met, your social needs met, etc, etc. And if you're engaged then in a hobby as a form of exercise, and especially if you're learning something, you see how these things start to come together. You start to get your needs met in balance in multiple ways. So that's all good. You may be interested to know as well, if you're on a panic attack, you can stop a panic attack by doing vigorous exercise, because that's what the panic attack is, a high firing off of the fight or flight response. So by doing squats, by sprinting, by lifting heavy objects rapidly, you basically sort the panic attack out, because you're doing the very thing which your body and brain are expecting at the moment, fighting with a predator or running from a predator or climbing a tree. So that sort of works. But normally, if you're in a supermarket having a panic attack, to start leaping all over the place, you'd get a strange reputation. So better do the 7-11 breathing exercise in that case. Diet. Again, our brain function is expecting a certain nutritional intake for the brain, because the brain's a chemical factory and it's got to manufacture these things internally, so it needs the raw materials. So a good, solid, balanced diet of non-processed natural foods. Plenty of information available on what constitutes a good diet. I'm a big fan of the paleo diet myself and paleo exercise systems. And you may have noticed in some of these briefs that a paleo type of approach to psychology as well. What the origins, what did our brains evolve to do in the first instance? And when we can understand that, we understand a lot of what the trouble we get in the modern world. So make sure you get a good diet. I understand when you're stressed, sometimes you don't feel like eating, sometimes you feel a bit nauseous, but try and keep a routine, try and eat something, try and force something down to keep the whole system going. Sleep, again, hugely important, regular sleep. People who are stressed struggle to sleep, but make sure you at least go to bed at a regular time. If you're not sleeping, practice relaxation techniques, practice guided imagery. Don't disrupt your routine so much that it's difficult to get it back. I know people who got stressed, so they didn't sleep, so they got up from bed, started playing computer games in the middle of the night. Well, when they finally sorted their problems out, their sleep cycle was so shot to pieces that it was just difficult to re-establish. You can re-establish it, but it's another thing to have to deal with. So try and keep regular hours, regular times, at least be resting and resting your eyes. Keep all that on a regular basis. So these are just top tips really, but your specific needs you may need to discuss with somebody. Okay, so having done all that, let's sum it all up. What we need to do to be healthy, happy and balanced is to work to get our essential emotional needs met in balance in the environment. When we get stressed out, when we start worrying about things, we tend to withdraw from the normal stuff of life because we're too tired, because we've got too much to do, because we don't feel like it, and we stop getting our needs met. We stop going out to our friends, we stop doing our hobbies, we stop engaging in our learning activities, whatever it is. And so we get a double whammy. We get the negative from the source of the stress, and we lose the positive from the good stuff we had. So even if you don't feel like it, force yourself to get out into the world and to do stuff to make you feel better, to meet your needs. That will lower your emotional arousal, it'll help you to sleep better, and you gradually rebuild the whole thing. So this is the formula for mental health. Work to get your needs met in balance. If you're struggling on your own, find out when and to whom should you refer for help. Who can you refer for help in your own system? And I give this brief to military personnel with things like chaplains, welfare workers, medics, but you will know somebody in your own system available to you when you need to seek help. So basically, if you're struggling alone, find somebody sensible who you trust, who can help. And my top tips for finding a therapist. If a therapist, and if you're paying, especially if you're paying for a therapist, if they help you to feel better within 1, 2 or 3 sessions maximum, you should be feeling better. If you're not feeling better after 3 sessions, stop seeing that therapist and go and find another one. Because these people, if they can do their job properly, they should make you feel better quickly. I'm not saying they'll solve all your problems for you quickly, but you should be feeling better quickly. Any therapist that tells you this is going to be the long haul, you'll be feeling worse before you feel better, do not go near them with a barge pole. That's not true. It's just an excuse for poor therapy. So if it works, stick with them. If it's not working after 3 sessions, finish with them, try somebody else, because it should be working. Well, that's the end of the presentation on stress. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you have a stress-free life.